So, for full context, one of my former colleagues texted me and was like, "Do you know anybody at Kent State football? Do you have any contacts? My buddy's trying to get the director job there." And I was like, "Kent State? I know the guy that's the head football guy at Kent State." So I looked up, and the guy Jake is gone now. He's not at Kent State anymore. And he went tactical. And I texted him. I was like, "Bro, you went tactical? Giddy up. We got to catch up." His exact words. Kent was not the best. And my wife was pregnant with our son. No chance I was sticking around for a demise. Took a pay cut, but this job is great. I'd make the move 11 times out of 10. Yeah. And then he said here, "Oh yeah, college football did nothing but mess me up. Only job I had in college where I felt protected and valued was working with Nick. He's probably one of 2 people that ever go back in. It's not just about the, clocking in, it's the best job ever." So he again was saying working in college, it got me just thinking about how delusional it is and how almost brainwashed some coaches working in it get told and if you leave, you're not committed. Oh, here's another text message. Sorry. You start talking. I'll find this other text message and then we'll continue on this rant.
Yeah. That is very interesting because kind of like you said, I think we, get sold this picture of how great working in collegiate athletics is. And then you get in it and you're like, wait, no one told me about any of these things that happen. And it's funny that comes up because the post that I made about not working in collegiate athletics, someone actually commented and was like, "Welcome to your life being greater outside of collegiate athletics, welcome to the world, high five kind of thing." So I think more and more people are seeing that it's not always everything it's cracked up to be. So I don't know.
And so here's the other text message. It was, "Good morning, sir. Want to thank you for your time this week. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to help me. Thanks for reaching out to so-and-so and putting us in contact. Thank you for saying that you did about looking into tactical. It's what I needed to hear. Most of what you said I knew, but I always talk myself out of trying something new. I love athletics. I've had a good experience at college, but where things are at, it's more important, and tactical is the better choice for me, and it's a great, so I feel like strength coaches, again, have just been sold, if you leave college athletics, you're kind of a loser. And, listen, if you want to work in it, that more power to you, but just the whole notion of you're not guarding your desk and in tactical, it's not like you're not working hard, or you're still working hard and you're expected to be there from 6 to 2 and people have to be there, but you're not selling your life for well, I got a group at 6 a.m. and a 6 p.m. and then I have really nothing in between. But if I'm not at my desk, everybody's going to hate me. And I'm doing this for such a small amount of money. And then you're being told that if you're not there, you don't care and you're a loser. And it's just how have we been so brainwashed?
I've been trying to think about this myself because I think collegiate athletics is so glorified. Everyone makes such a big deal about, working at X, Y, and Z school or, this team or this athlete. And there's so much notoriety around it. But at the same time, as you're talking, I am really wondering if COVID, coinciding with this evolution that NCAA has changed all these rules, I wonder if it's a combination of coaches being this doesn't have to be my life. I can be home or whatever it may be. I can go do other things. I can still be a coach and not have to deal with all of the things I'm dealing with in the day-to-day. So I wonder if it was just a mix of eye-opening, you have to be away from your job. And now it's people are well, I think I kind of like that. And also a mix of, the NCAA rules and the model now doesn't prioritize any of the people that have to work with the athletes. And it actually has made a lot of stuff worse for support staff. So I wonder if both of those together has really just created a perfect storm of mass exodus out.
Well, for me personally too, like I've seen it too well at a high level, like working for Chris Doyle and Kirk Ferentz at the University of Iowa. First of all, I knew I was working for them. I wasn't working for the University of Iowa. Like if football didn't win, KF's gone, that means Doyle's gone, that means I'm gone. Like so I understood where I was working. And if we won, we got paid more. If we lost, we didn't get our jobs anymore. Like we knew that. And that was very clear cut. And this is not the very first question, but as we're on the topic, like you and I talked off air, working in Olympic sport was supposed to be the safe route. Like if you wanted to work in Olympic sports, you're not supposed to be having the ability to leave. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that that happened with you, as we talked off air, like how did that experience reveal to you about the profession, and how has it changed your thoughts on career security? Because it's completely changed mine.
Yeah, and I mean, even just to jump to that, I like your questions are great, by the way. I hope we get to dive into all of them, but I literally had to like make sure that I make notes because I wanted to hit all of the things. So, but no, my
Appreciate
experience
that.
with it, I think it kind of to your point, it confirmed to me that there is no security in this business of collegiate athletics, clearly at any level or any sector, because I think a lot of young coaches in the field understand, like, I think there's a lot of desire to be in football. And I think early on coaches understand there's a lot of high risk, high reward, like we talked about. So kind of to your story, if you win, reward. If you lose, you're gone. And everyone knows that. And on the Olympic side, you are almost sold a story of like you're secure because you work with multiple teams and it's not about wins and losses, and football is what really fuels the finances, and so everything is based on football. But if the football coach gets fired, like I'm untouched because I don't deal with that program. And so I think that there's a lot of just selling that you're secure, and what I have come to find out is you're not. And it didn't matter. It did not matter at the end of the day. And I'm not gonna try to be like very braggadocious, but I have had a very accomplished career, and I've had a lot of milestones, and I've done a lot of things, and like that didn't matter. And so what it reminded me is that there are people in decision making positions that maybe are not qualified. And it really makes me worried for the field moving forward, because I've been very vocal about this, is that I don't know what's going to come of strength and conditioning coaches and Olympic sports performance departments. And it makes me wonder if there is no more substance in the field moving forward, and that people are just going to get hired based on who a sport coach wants or doesn't want. And it's been so
Ooh,
interesting because I'm seeing made up titles. Titles don't matter anymore. I'm
right.
seeing made up positions, strength coaches that aren't even under the umbrella of a sports performance department anymore. It's really kind of gone haywire. And so to me, the model that I've seen before, there is no security. And so I think an important lesson that I learned, and I did learn this before, being terminated, but your identity is not about your title and your logo, and you have to find a way to separate yourself from that,
Mm,
because I think if you
mm.
don't, you're going to end up being so devastated the day that that meeting happens and you walk out of there and you have to clear your desk or you have to do whatever, and you don't get to see the athletes anymore. It can be very shocking. And so again, I think for me, just understanding that things are evolving. There's not security on the Olympic side like people thought. And even with a resume that is stacked, maybe if you rub someone the wrong way, that's it. And so I think it's important to really reevaluate all coaches. Where's your stance, and where's your security? And if you get fired tomorrow, are you going to be okay?
Mm. Yeah, that'll preach, because I mean, I had that same thing happen to me when getting terminated without cause, where it's like, hey, that was my identity. I was kind of told the same thing. You work with football, you're the director of football performance, but you are supposed to be with, you train these other teams, you train softball, you train, like you work for the department. You're not going to get let
Mm-hmm.
go by the football coach. but all it did was just be like, all right, the head football coach tells the AD to tell the person that recruit, like, so that's the reality of it. Just like another FCS coach who works and runs the whole department. Oh, that's the Strength Coach Network line. We're going to put them on hold real quick.
Whoa.
That's the second time that has happened. That's going to go right to our answering machine. Oh my goodness. Come on.
I love that you have a landline.
Yes, we have a landline here at Strength Coach Network, folks. Anybody that, like, if you call, you will get in touch with us on the website number.
On the podcast.
Team Builder is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for online software for strength coaches. It does not matter what sector of strength and conditioning you work in, you want to get Team Builder because you will be able to program for your athletes, simply distribute the training to them, and make changes, modifications, whatever you need. I've been utilizing them since 2019 when I was back at Towson. I still use it in person at Goldfinch with all my remote clients throughout the country, and in person at the high school, Centennial High, right down the road when I was volunteering for them. You got to check out Team Builder in the link down below. The people that work for them are former strength and conditioning coaches, so they get it. They are able to help you with all of your needs. Again, reach out to your Team Builder rep and learn more about them in the link down below. Sorry, so this strength coach, he's on the podcast live. Oh my goodness, somebody is really trying to get in touch with us. Strength Coach Network, this is Justin. Yeah, see. Yeah, somebody's trying to talk to me about something. That was an automated service. That was not somebody trying to call. Anyways, so this strength coach runs the department. The head football coach didn't do well. The head strength coach was told that he's going to be let go. So same thing, like nobody ever is safe anymore. And like you said, you've been successful. So let's lean into that. You've coached championship level teams at multiple universities. Brag on that a little bit. And then talk about what was the common denominator behind the success that you saw with those teams.
I think I have been very intentional, but also stroke of luck to walk into some of these really successful programs. My career started out at the University of Kentucky, and, being a kid from Chicago, I don't know anything about Kentucky or Division I athletics because I was a D3 athlete, and I walked into a really great SEC program, and that really set the standard for me of what a championship caliber program looks like. I think I had a great mentor there, and so I took a lot of what I saw there and brought it everywhere else. And so, VCU, their track and field team, while I was there, captured 5 conference titles. They were an amazing group, and I worked with field hockey and lacrosse, and they were getting a lot of their success kind of on my exit on the way out, so I didn't get to share in that a ton. But then going to Clemson, massively successful soccer program as well as softball, and they had just started that softball program, and our 2020 year was the COVID year, and that was the first season it got cut. But that following 2021 spring, the softball program won the regular season in the ACC. So for being basically a year and a half old program, that was pretty awesome to be part of. And then again, I've seen a lot of success at Tennessee with soccer as well as tennis. Tennis made a run all the way to the Final Four, which was historic for them. And so I think, one of the things that I've noticed is championship environments, they don't just happen. They're very intentional, and I think it's important to know that you have to work at it to be at that caliber. One of the things that I saw a lot, especially at Clemson, was just consistency from the top down. The sport coaches there were very clear about standards, expectations, everyone being held to them. There was not really an exception to, well, this is my star athlete, so if they are late, it's okay. Like, there was none of that. I think there was a lot of alignment too within, all of the departments that were going to touch that program and have hands on that program. And so everyone was on the same page, and everyone played their role and did it accordingly. And one of the things that I really appreciated actually about Clemson, specifically women's soccer, is that we would have massive weekly meetings. So anyone that was going to be involved with soccer would all sit down and talk about the plan for the week. And it was the sport coaches, the athletic trainer, myself as the strength coach, our dietitian, our compliance department, our game day operations, like everyone was involved and everyone was on the same page every single week. And so I think that things like that are the things that I saw that made it very easy to be successful.
So one of the next question that I had for you was those programs, Clemson, Tennessee, postseason runs. What do these modern athletes need from performance staffs that wasn't essential 5 or 10 years ago? But it sounds like you were kind of doing before this high performance, like it kind of had some wind here or there. And it sounds like you were being able to be one of those forefront teams that were doing it. So based off of that experience and what you're seeing nowadays, like what was essential now that maybe didn't get highlighted as much back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being an athlete, and my experience was, my sport coach made up conditioning stuff for us to do. The strength coach gave us the football program to run because we were a D3 school. We had one coach per, 16 teams. Things weren't individualized. You kind of just had your card and you went. There was not really a lot of questions being asked or like, why are we doing this? If the football team does this, why is the gymnastics team? So I think now athletes really appreciate context and like understanding the why behind the type of training that they're doing and how does this carry over to sport or how does this make them better in their position or in their role. And so having those types of conversations help promote buy-in for the athletes. And I think they also appreciate feeling like they're being coached and they're not just being barked at or their reps aren't being counted or like, I don't care about the weight on the bar, but I care about them individually and how are they getting better and what markers are we looking at. And so I think them feeling like they're being taken care of from a team standpoint, but also on an individual standpoint, is a point that really got lost, 10, 15, I don't want to say 20 years ago, because my God, that'd be so long ago for me to be an athlete, but that long ago in, in the college scene, I think they care so much more about their development and they want to know things and they ask a lot.
You talked about, okay, you were an athlete, but anybody that doesn't know, which I mean, I don't know if they don't know, but you still compete at a national level in Olympic weightlifting. Like, how does that help you be a better coach? And I say that, and I got a conversation with another coach coming up here soon where there's two ditches that we can fall in as strength coaches, where it's only about the athletes that I've trained and I never train myself. Or it could be the ditch of I always exercise and I don't actually train anybody because I'm always exercising and I'm always worried about my program. Those are both ditches that we have to avoid. We need to train athletes and we need to train ourselves. So how do you, training at the highest level, how does that help you working with your athletes?
Well, just in my own personal opinion on that, where you're talking about the two different ditches, I think if you are a coach and you're not training yourself, you are missing out on a massive opportunity to connect to your athletes. For me personally, like it makes me very relatable because the athletes then are curious to know about my training and when's my next competition and how is this going. And so it creates dialogue, but also for me as a coach, I can understand the perspective from both the coaching side, but also the athlete side. So I can understand how it feels to train when you're tired or when you're not motivated or when you're just like really struggling and stressed. Maybe my stressors are different than theirs. Maybe theirs relate more back to school, whereas mine might relate more back to my job. But I think it gives me a bit of an edge or a better understanding for what my athletes are going through. And then it also helps them to train a bit more, be a bit more intentional because they're like, well, Coach Metz is doing this. So like, I can't be a weasel and not do it. So I think it creates a really, really great dynamic for myself and my athletes, but also I can use myself as an example. I can be like, does this make sense? Like, is this percentage going to work? Like, is this really heavy? Do these movements flow? So it's a way for me to almost trial things for the athletes without them even knowing that I'm doing it.
Hawken Dynamic is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for force plates and for handheld dynamometers. Not only am I using it now in the private sector at Goldfinch, I was utilizing this software when I was back at Towson University. You're able to transport the plates because I've taken them from our private sector facility to our other locations, also been able to take it from our private in-person location to the high school down the road to do some testing with athletes right then and there. You're able to pair your true strength with the striking difference machine. The people at Hawken are fantastic. The technology is second to none. You have to learn more about Hawken Dynamic in the link down below.
So I think it helps a lot, and I do think that it's an opportunity that coaches miss sometimes.
I think so too. And it actually gives context to like, hey, this is what this percentage feels like. And okay, maybe you're not, and that's the other, like the problem then that some coaches will fall into is like, okay, Ryan, you're not allowed to coach that athlete because you don't squat 500 pounds or whatever the number is, right? Like the bench post and the field goal post is going to keep getting moved. And it's like, okay, at what point, like, what if I did, but then what if I got hurt? Am I now not able to do it anymore? Like, I know what it feels like to lift a certain percentage of my 1 rep max and then can relate that to you. Like hearing that exhale. And I think I've seen you post something where it's like men trying to tell me as a woman like that. I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So take the floor.
It's just funny because I find myself so many times, like, I think for me personally, programming intensities as I was learning to program was really difficult because it's like, how do you understand what 70% feels like or 80% or 90%? And so me being an athlete, I would find myself so many times being in my office being like, do I want to do a power clean for 3 at 85? Well, that number would be oh no. Like, I'm like, well, then we're not going to do that. And so I think it's helped me also avoid potentially putting my athletes in positions that they would really struggle, because if I'm sitting there being like, I would struggle, I would assume that they would probably have a very similar feeling. So I think, again, trial and error has helped a lot with that.
Getting back to your other teams,
yeah.
Tennessee and Clemson. So during your time, the soccer program at Tennessee captured the division title. What were early performance cultural levers did you focus on the moment you arrived? Like what were kind of the big things that you did? And then that way coaches can hear it and then start to apply it wherever they are, knowing that it's not going to be exact plug and play, but okay, these principles that Ryan's talking about, I can apply.
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand the context of that. So when I got to Tennessee, it was actually the middle of the spring. I left Clemson in April, I believe, and then I started at Tennessee middle of April. It was a pretty quick transition, and it wasn't the usual break at the semester. And so with that, there was an advantage for me. And so I think when you're new to a role, a school, a team, whatever it is, you need to get to know those athletes. And so luckily for me, I had time with them that I actually set up an individual meeting with every single athlete that I was going to be working with, because I didn't know them and they were about to leave for summer. So I was supposed to program for these athletes that I had no idea how they moved, what they were good at, what they weren't good at, what they needed to feel motivated. And so I just sat down with all of them and I asked them, like, what do you do well? What don't you do well? Where do you think you can improve? How can I help you accomplish certain goals? Because I wanted to have all of that laid out so that come summer I could have that in mind, but come fall I could like kind of hit the ground running with these athletes. And so I think stepping into that role, you have to do that so that you can understand all of that stuff. The other part of it for me was I don't know what athletes have before me. Like I don't ever, sometimes I'll look into like, okay, who was their previous coach? Maybe I know them. Maybe I can understand how they ran things. But normally I have my own way that I like to go about things in the weight room, the standards I have, the expectations that I have. So even at that point, I think it's super important to connect with those athletes about what your expectations are of them. So just understanding, like I just had a set of like 10 rules that I would give to all of my teams that were like, these are the expectations that I have for you. Your coach may not say these things. These are mine. So when you're in the weight room or you're on my time, this is what we follow. And so it was simple things. It was like, don't be late, be prepared for the session. If you have an issue, communicate. Like, it's like very easy. You would think very easy things, but I wanted it to be laid out that this is what I expect, and I expect it out of all of you, so that there was never going to be any question or wavering to those standards. And so 1, get to know the athlete, but 2, also let them get to know you and how you expect to run things as well. So I think that was what really kind of set the groundwork for a lot of the success early on.
Flipping that on its head, if you were now there and you had some new athletes coming in, would you recommend meeting with them right away? Or like, freshmen come in, let's just say July or August, right? But if you're not going to meet with the whole team until the semester's over, would you recommend meeting with your freshmen right away to have that first meeting for any of our listeners out there?
I have not. Maybe there's benefit to it. Maybe there's not. With the freshmen, what I've done is usually run them through a full semester of training, because then I can gather some information on them. I can see how they, look at practice, because I was always out at practices. I can see how they move in the weight room. I can talk with the coach. I can kind of get a gauge on their work ethic or how they're motivated. And so for me, it's a lot of observation of the new athletes early on. And then once I get to kind of gather my data points, that gives me a little bit more information, so we have some better talking points. And so when it came to new athletes, usually I would hold off until about the spring, just so that, again, we can kind of observe and see how you're doing. And if you want to, again, I think that there might be
This is too.
I think I'm just like a lucky person.
Straight Coach Network, this is Justin. Yeah, we're getting spam. You're just lucking us with spam right now.
Maybe it's because the amount of spam calls I get to my phone daily, maybe I'm just transferring it to you.
Yes, you are. Holy cow. To your point about the not meeting with the freshman right away. Now, I like the idea of not, and I also like the idea of doing it, because changing, like at Iowa, we didn't meet with the freshmen right away. We would meet with the players in the off season. So in January, and we didn't meet with the freshmen right away. And the reason, like, we didn't have a real reason other than, like, we already kind of trained them separately. We treated them differently. But it was not, and like, they kind of learned what was going to be expected of them during their recruitment. But it was never like, hey, you're here. Like, no, we meant everything we said. Like, if your toes aren't behind the line, if you're not doing things the right way, we're going to tell you and you have to do it. And this is going to be really, really hard. And because we didn't do that right away, my old boss kind of felt like, hey, we kind of missed an opportunity to kind of remind the kids. That way kids weren't like going a full semester of like, geez, these coaches kind of like, they're kind of assholes. Right. And so it's like, okay, it could be important. Any listeners out there, maybe you want to meet with your freshmen to be like, hey, the standard is still the standard. Now, I agree with you, because it's like, it's not so much like, yeah, you're going to learn and get to know your athletes, but you also, to also quote the guy that I work with at Iowa, Ray Braithwaite, who's now in charge, when you meet with a new athlete, you're not meeting them. You're meeting their representative. You're meeting who they want you to think they are. And you don't really know who they are. So it's really just like getting to establish that first meeting, but that's not who they really are. That's who they want you to think they are.
Right. And so I do want to clarify, I will give all of them, and every semester that we have anyone new, I will give them my standards and expectations. So they get to learn right away that and to your point, like, if I'm like, get your toes behind the line. No, you're on the line.
Powerlift is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for exercise equipment. Made here in the USA, right down the road in the state of Iowa, Powerlift has the ability to customize whatever you need in your room, regardless of the sector of strength conditioning. If you need a massive, big room, they have the ability to help you with that. If you're confined with space and you need to get creative, their reps are able to help you get what you need done and being able to get any customizations that you or your organization want with your logo on the equipment. Click the link down below to learn more about Powerlift. And if you have any questions about them, please feel free to reach out to us.
Get behind the line. They start to understand that right away, but the individual meetings where I kind of talk more about them, I think I do that a little bit later so that they can kind of see the flow of college and how things go. And, I think it just gives them a little bit of time to settle. So yeah, I'm very upfront with, here's my 10 rules. This is why we do what we do. And then later I'll kind of meet with them individually about themselves from there.
Clemson, women's soccer and softball, they hit new heights. What did you think were either metrics, habits, standards, anything in your opinion that, like, hey, looking back, this could have been a direct correlation or kind of a cause as to why this team and why these teams were successful?
Yeah, I think to the point earlier, consistency was massively important with both of those groups. as I mentioned, like I was super thankful for those sport coaches. Both of those staffs just, I think, led with a lot of integrity, and they were very high quality about how they went about things. And, you know, very, very well versed, obviously, in their sports. They had been working with soccer and or softball for a long time. So I think they also understood what worked and what didn't. And so it was very easy for me to fit into the mold and be the extension for them in the weight room. You know, for example, like I knew every Tuesday, 7 a.m. soccer was coming in to lift, regardless of when the games were, how many we had, whatever it was. It was very rare that they were going to take a day off. And with softball, we transitioned things a little bit based on COVID, so their schedules shifted just slightly. But when the year that we had that, I knew that softball was coming in 2 to 3 times a week. I knew that these were the things that we were going to hit. We were going to have a long weekend of whatever, you know, playing the games. And so it was like, I understood the consistency piece, and they barely ever deviated from it. And so I think because of that, it was really, really simple to find success because the athletes knew what to expect. The coaches held them to standards, and I knew how to execute and really kind of follow through to be the extension for them. I don't think like everything, you know, was perfect. It can't be. You're running a real life model of stuff, but their behaviors really allowed for success. And so some of the, you know, metrics that we looked at, like we talked about tracking their sleep and their recovery. We tested their readiness. We had GPS trackers on both of those teams. And so we were able to have a lot of objective data with them. And because we had all these different data points and we were in contact constantly and we communicated well and the coaches were open to the information I was giving them, it helped us to make better decisions about how to train, when to take a day off if we needed it, if anyone needed to pull back. And so again, I just think the consistency and the openness within those staffs really helped to find a lot of success, especially with softball being brand new. They stepped into that role pretty easily and they saw success very early on, which was great.
I think that premise can be applied to training too. Like what you just said there, and anybody listening, I'm going to synthesize it. It was, like you said, the consistency of the things that we did. There was nothing magical about it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with training. Like your program doesn't have to be spectacularly, amazingly sports specific. If you come in, you get stressed, you recover, you get stressed differently the next time, you recover again, and you keep compounding that, you're going to get stronger. Like, it's the said principle. We're not landing people on the moon. It really is that simple.
It is very simple. And I'm not sure which question you're about to ask next, but actually that's one of my points is I'm not very fancy. I like the meat and potatoes of training. I'm a very simple coach. I think people overcomplicate things. And if you can just find consistency in a couple of things and do those easy things well, you probably have a recipe for success.
Then let's go with the you designing and explaining like your blueprint for long-term athletic development. And this will be based off of the fact that, like, anybody that's not aware, you've worked with soccer, softball, tennis, football, field hockey, lacrosse, track and field. So what is your blueprint for long-term athletic development in all of those sports, because you've worked with them?
Yeah, someone did the math for me. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I've worked with over 17 different sports. So I've run the gamut, I think, as far as college athletics is concerned. Wow. Yeah, and so it's very funny because I mentioned before I wanted to make sure that I wrote some notes so I hit on all my points, and literally the first thing I wrote down is train simple. I think that's super important, and that's really just an overlooked concept. Like, I think to your point earlier, it has to be so sport specific and it has to look like this, and we got to put it on social media and I got to get the likes. And it's like, no, if you just do like the really simple things well, you're going to be okay. So train simple is one of the principles I think I would say for my blueprint. I also wrote like exposure beats avoidance. So if you can continue to expose your athletes to things, and even things that they're not comfortable with, they're going to become more confident. They're going to become more coordinated. Things might seem, difficult at first, but is it difficult because it's the first time you're introducing it? Or like what is, the scenario there? So I think exposing athletes to things often rather than pulling back because it's not how you wanted it to be, or they're not looking a certain way, is super important. Athletes aren't fragile.
No,
No, and
no.
I find myself kind of, being on the side of a little less is better than a little more. But I do think that there are times where you need to take liberties as a coach and push them with purpose,
Yes.
and not be so scared because they can't be sore. Like, no, we need those things. And so you do have to push the athletes because they're not fragile. Look at what they do. They play,
No.
contact sports, or they play things at a really quick speed or a really high level or whatever it may be. So you have to prepare them. I think one of the biggest things, though, that for me is super important is just the relationship builds and pushes that, success more than a program that you write. And I talked about it earlier, and I think, we've all heard about, athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, like whatever the quote is. But really gaining trust and buy-in is going to help prepare that athlete and make them want to be, at your session, or train with a little bit more intention, or get a little bit better here, or do the extra bucket of work, or whatever you've got. And so the relationships become really, really important at this level for sure. Yeah, I don't know if that fills all of it. I might have some more points when I think about it, but yeah, that's probably some good principles to start with.
Yeah, we'll dive into that even more, but I'm going to go back to a conversation I had with Uncle Bob Alejo, who now works in Major League Baseball after working in baseball for a while, and he talked on his most recent episode where he's like, Vitruve is the trusted VBT source for Strength Coach Network, and I have been utilizing this for years at Goldfinch, and I'm going to continue to utilize it because the great price for the encoder, as well as the accuracy with the data. Whether I'm measuring average, peak, or any other metric, if I want to include range of motion, fatigue loss during the set, interest set, whatever it is, I can trust Vitruve. And they are continuing to push the needle and continuing to educate coaches on best practices within the VBT world. Not only do they live in that VBT world, but now they've come out with their new hub. And if you want to learn more about the hub and how it can help you with all of your athletes that you are working with, as we are starting to do this at Goldfinch for our middle school all the way up to college athletes, check them out in the link down below. He's like, this idea of, overtraining is so like, we're so far away from it. And like, he's like neurological deficit. He's like, do you know how like, we don't push our athletes that far to do it. He's like, we're undercooking the steak or under baking the cake in an attempt to never burn it. He's like, but you still have to cook it. Like you still have to do hard things because like you said, they're going to do real, like, let's take soccer. Okay. When you were working with those girls and they were going to go play against another team that was going to stop them from winning the ACC, were they going in for a slide tackle gently, or were they like, you know what, I want to win that ball and I might run into you? Like,
no, because you know that they would get yelled at if they went into it gently.
Exactly.
So you have to prepare them for that.
Yeah, it's this whole idea of like less is not always more. Sure, there are times where the minimal effective dose is appropriate because if we look at the totality of the work that they're doing and everything is like, it all compounds because there's stress everywhere. But in the off season, when that game stress is not there, you can put more of it on their plate, coaches.
Yes.
So I think you need to take that away from this kind of part of our conversation right here.
Well, I do want to say one of the things that I used to do to kind of get in front of it and combat it, because I know so many sport coaches have been like, well, the athletes can't be sore. And it's like, well, then we're going to be hurt. So I used to say that a lot to my athletes. I was like, would you rather be sore? Or would you rather be injured? What do you want?
Ooh.
And, to get in front of it, whenever we would do something that I knew would cause soreness, I would tell them at the end, hey, you're going to be sore. This is why. It is okay. I would just make sure to vocalize those things so that they wouldn't go running to, their sport coach complaining that I'm, making them lift heavy weight for X amount of reps, because I've had athletes do that before. I've had athletes be like, Coach Metz is making us lift 95% for sets of 10. And I'm like, not possible. Not,
No,
no, I didn't.
no, maybe 10 sets of 1. No.
So I just think it's important. And again, to the point of like, athletes need context. They need to understand why. And so you have to tell them those things. But again, as a sport coach or as a strength coach, you have to expose them to those things. So
I'm also laughing because just personally, like, had that experience with athletes where I have like been like, hey, now in the private sector, being like, hey, mom or dad, they're going to be sore from this. It'll go in a day or two, and it's not. We did a moderate load. We did a 1x20 right now. We exposed them to a lot of things. It's kind of going to be new where they're moving, but literally this soreness will go away in 2 days or a day, maybe two at worst.
yeah.
And even when I got to Towson, so when I got to Towson, they had concussion rates through the roof, but they never did any neck training. So like literally one of the first things we did was we did neck training, but we only could do manual neck because we didn't have any equipment to do it. So we're doing manual neck. And the AT's like, bro, the guys are coming in like asking for heat pads on their neck because I didn't preempt them. Like, hey, your necks are going to be a little bit sore. And like they were trying to complain about all this stuff. And the head football coach was like, no, you guys need a strong neck. Like, chill out. But yes, coaches, be on the front end of it. Tell them that they might be sore and it ain't the end of the world.
No, you need.
Which gets back to why you need to train as a coach so that way you'll be fine.
Yes, and you need the stimulus to make the adaptation. Otherwise, you're not doing much.
So this will actually pair really well with it. How does your approach to readiness testing, because you talked about it, load management and recovery, how do you periodize that across, okay, in season, we can't just always pull and use the same recovery modality. We actually probably don't want to use those in the off season so their body doesn't become accustomed to it when they need it. This might be a completely novel idea for some of our listeners who are in school still, or they're just brand new coaches. We're like, wait a minute, I shouldn't let my athletes recover in the off season. And they're like, I have to change up the recovery modality. There might be listeners out there that are hearing that. So how did you handle that? And how do you handle it now?
Yeah, I totally understand the concept that you're talking about. Actually, Clemson, the director there preached that a lot about making sure that your body in the off season has the ability to recover on its own without the help of, the athletic trainer or another tool or whatever, so that you can adapt well. And then in season, we'll use all of those different modalities. He was a really big proponent of that, just, making sure that the athletes are doing it on their own more so. For me, as far as the readiness testing, the recovery stuff, I think you have to be extremely dynamic and very creative about how you go about that, because you're dealing with, a soccer team has 28 athletes on it now, I think is the cap. And then you've got softball. I think they've got, 25. So you've got, 50 different individuals that are going to need 50 different things because everyone feels a little certain way, this way or whatever. So finding things that will consistently work and whether it's like a time frame or a modality or something, I think is going to be super important. And like soccer, for example, they live in like a chronic volume constantly. Like when they're in season, like they're just spiked all over the place. Their volume is high constantly. So you have to give them almost like these micro exposures to recovery or to any kind of readiness. And it's not one massive testing event day, or not just, hey, come in on Saturday and recover. It's like, no, they probably need to be having this constantly because they're constantly in a chronic state. Whereas someone like a softball team, they have like their practices are tougher than their games as far as load is concerned.
Yes.
And so you have to make sure that you have recovery tools available for them, after the sessions or before their sessions. And a lot of the fatigue on game day comes from they're just standing. So it's like they don't need anything because they're physically taxed. They're just tired. And so you have to understand the difference between the modality that you're using, but how often are you doing it? And so I think that that's super important. And recovery, it doesn't have to be black and white. Readiness testing doesn't have to be black and white. You just have to find all these different points that can help tell a story of how the athletes are doing, and then let's modify the things that aren't working, and let's continue to go on with the things that we find that do work. I think, again, it's a lot of trial and error, but it's going to be dependent on what's going on with the team and what resources do you have available to you, and in season, out of season, positional. There's so many factors that can go into it. So just trying to find some consistency of what works, I think, is a good place to start.
The thing I wrote down there for some of our listeners would potentially be the practice piece, and then in sports, soccer and field hockey, the word fitness. and how sometimes that can be frustrating for a sport coach or a strength coach to try to work with sport coaches on that. Did you ever have any of that? And how did you kind of navigate that word? Because I know some sport coaches that or strength coaches that have worked with the soccers and the field hockeys, and they always wanted more conditioning, like you said, just dumping chronic amounts of stress on the athlete.
Mm-hmm. I think it's super important to be smart about that. There's a very, very big difference between, I hate the word fitness, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out there. I hate the word fitness. I think people say it and it's like a 1980s concept and no one knows what it means, but they just say it because that gives them credibility. I don't know. But I just, it's super important to understand there's a difference between being game fit and just being fit.
Hawken Dynamic is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for force plates and for handheld dynamometers. Not only am I using it now in the private sector at Goldfinch, I was utilizing this software when I was back at Clemson University. You're able to transport the plates because I've taken them from our private sector facility to our other locations. Also been able to take it from our private in-person location to the high school down the road to do some testing with athletes right then and there. You're able to pair your true strength with the striking difference machine. The people at Hawken are fantastic. The technology is second to none. You have to learn more about Hawken Dynamic in the link down below.
Like just having a conditioning base. And there are athletes that if you tell them to go run 10 miles, they will come back and not be out of breath, and they did it and it's fine. And it's like you put them in a soccer game for 90 minutes and they are struggling. And it's because you're having them work systems that aren't working for their sport. And so I think when a lot of coaches think fitness, they think these long, slow running, whatever it may be. But in reality, a lot of sports need these high intensity exposures. And so you have to be very smart about where you put them throughout the week. And to your point about, chronic volume and being over stressed in certain areas, especially in season, the game for a soccer athlete is going to be the most taxing thing they do that week. So you have to almost deload them going into the game, and then they can spike and recover. And so you don't want to sprint them the day before a game because it's such a high CNS tax that if they need to sprint in the game, they're fried. So it's this balance of figuring out when to pull what stimulus. And so fitness, again, I think it's silly because you need to train the athlete to be able to play their sport. So one of the things that I used to do a lot, and we did this at Clemson, it was the first time I got introduced to this, was we almost gave them conditioning that was just them playing. And we did it over the summer because the sport coaches, they can't be involved in the summer. Us as strength coaches, the minute that you put a ball at their feet, now we become a sport coach, and now that's a compliance issue. But what we can do is we can have athletic trainers available for safety reasons, and then we can go give them a script. You guys are going to go play 5v5. Here's your dimensions. These are the rounds that you're going to do for the minutes, and go. So you give them the exposure to stuff without giving them unnecessary volume. And that was always a big issue that I had is we don't need to fill like buckets just because they're empty. Is it going to help? Or can we actually do stuff that's going to be valuable to the athlete? So can we get some more sprinting in? Can we get some more ball work in? Well, are we running them because they just haven't hit their volume yet? Like, where are we at? And so I think being very, again, smart and intentional on how you're planning their week, but also what's the purpose behind what they're doing.
Something that I thought of as you were saying there, why do you think sport coaches and strength coaches will not value that a game is actually a training load and a training day? Because I feel like it's like, hey, yeah, okay, we had a high day, practice is going to be this amount of a game. But I think sometimes strength coaches forget no, a game is still a stimulus. And that's I don't know. I feel like I'm asking a really bad question, but I'm trying to place an emphasis no. There's going to be a high amount of sprinting, you need to recover from it, but that is the training stimulus. That is the most important one. And that needs to be taken into account for the totality of what's going on instead of coaches just being like, oh, well, that's the game. It's like, Yeah, but it's also a training stimulus that they need to recover from.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult for me to kind of understand the question, because for me, I've always known like the game is the stimulus. That is what we are working up to. And so if there are, a lacking of understanding in that, you have to also understand like the athletes are going to school to go to school, sure, but to play their sport. The point is the game. And so that has to factor into your overall volume for the week, or however you're periodizing things, because that plays a massive role in not only their acute fatigue levels, but their chronic and the residual fatigue that you get for the rest of that next week. And so you have to plan things appropriately, because again, in soccer, the game is going to be the biggest stimulus they have all week, versus softball practice is the biggest stimulus that they have all week. And so you have to understand that as a strength and conditioning professional. First of all, where is it coming from? But also it has to be a factor, because you have to work around it.
Did you see that happening, making it such a big stimulus because of everything that athletes would do pregame with all the pregame warm-up stuff? Because I know I saw it in football. Does it happen in your other sports?
We did see, not, I mean, I don't think that like pregame stuff contributed a ton to soccer. I know at Tennessee, for example, all of the pregame, I think they had about half an hour or so of work that they would do beforehand, and it accumulated to almost a mile that they were running even before they touched the field. And so I do think that is important to factor in, but also because of the type of technology that we were using, we could look at first half, second half, warm up, and everything together. And so I do think that there are people that struggle to understand that the warm up is still physical activity, and you do still have to incorporate that in. And that was a discussion that we would have at Tennessee, like, hey, the warm-up's getting a little long. We're putting a mile on them already. Where can we cut things down at? Because I think the coaches understood, like, the game is, again, going to be very taxing, and we don't need them 2 miles deep before we even step on the field. So that is a very important factor, and not to be disregarded at all.
No, and shout out to the homie Nick DeMarco for putting that on my radar, because we started to realize like we're doing a half of a game's amount of work between all of the like jitter that the athletes had, because they'd show up early and then they're going to go run and they're going to do all this, and then they have so they're warming up before the team warms up, and it's just like, with no wonder at the end of the day they're exhausted, because they're doing a game and a half worth of work on one day, not to mention the adrenal fatigue and like true just CNS exhaustion from like listening to music and being amped 5 hours prior to the game, then during the game. And it's like, yeah, your body is just shot.
I think also to your point, all of the things that you just laid out, another big thing that was eye-opening for me, because I don't play soccer. I've never played a day in my life. I can't kick a soccer ball to save my life. But understanding that all of that stimulus and that CNS like frying and all of that, it takes a really long time for the athletes to come back down. And so the sleep the day, like that night, they don't get good sleep. Terrible. Therefore, they're not getting good recovery. And so your next day training, I think, is something that needs to be put on coaches' radar, because that's something that I didn't even think about. Like, they really struggle to fall asleep that night because they've been so stimulated all day that a lot of your athletes are fried the next day. And it has nothing to do, it could be a very normal game. It's just they've been on for so long that it takes them so long to come back down.
One of the last questions about the X's and O's here is, with your Olympic weightlifting background, how much of that shows up in the training for your athletes, even though they don't play team sport, they don't Olympic lift, right? And I've talked about doing the power complex to replace Olympic weightlifting, to replace cleans. I learned that from another coach, where I think you can break it up into its parts. It's not the exact same, but if you have an athlete that can't do it because they have a wrist limitation, some sort of injury where they need it to high pull, I think that can accomplish the things you're looking for in a high pull.
Dasher is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for timing gates for your athletes. Whether you're trying to run A-cells, curve, flies, change in direction with the Pro Agility, the 505, modified 505, whatever you want to do, get valid and reliable setup with your Dasher. I had the black, the blue, and now we have the silver at Goldfinch. We're completely moving over from the blues to just only having the silvers. I only test my athletes on the silvers because it has helped me save so much time, whether I'm going from Ankeny over to Nevada or Ankeny over to Huxley, whatever I got to do. I save so much time, and I want you to be able to save so much time with your setup because we know that time is precious as strength coaches. Now, not only are you going to be able to save time, but you're going to be able to save money with this great product, and you have a valid and reliable product that has run through countless different articles, as you continue to see online being published with the accuracy of this information. So, if you want to learn more about Dasher, click the link down below to be able to go to their website and learn more about them.
I think it also works as a compliment. My evolution on this has continued to evolve. So with all of that word vomit, how does Olympic weightlifting show up in your programs that you write for these athletes?
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about the weight room, and I'm sure you've heard this, weights don't lie. And so if you're putting in work or you're not putting in work, I can see that right away in the weight room. At 45 pounds is always going to weigh 45 pounds. And whether you can move it fast or slow, it's going to tell me something about your training level. And so for me personally, you know, like you mentioned, I used to Olympic lift all of my athletes to a point, and then I started to get away from it because I was basically confronted with a "we don't do that here" philosophy. And so I had to figure out a different way to get the stimulus that I wanted from these athletes. And so what I learned to do was just pair really heavy strength movements with really high jumping, like CNS output movements. And that helped me a lot, I think, from a just resiliency standpoint, but also, kind of satisfying my Olympic brain so that I felt like they were kind of getting the things that they needed and the stimulus that they needed. I love Olympic lifting. I think it, you know, just checks so many boxes in such a simplified way. And by that, I don't mean Olympic lifting is simple. I just mean it's very time efficient if you can teach it and it does the things that you need. But, you know, beyond just the movements itself, I think just understanding that it's important quality over weight on the barbell is something that I preach all the time to my athletes, because I understand that you can get very hurt if you're not smart about how you train. And then, like I said before, like exposure is super important, especially in building confidence, especially if you're working with athletes that have never Olympic lifted, they're going to feel very silly. And so if you can just get them to repeat the movement, they're going to become more efficient at it. Therefore, they feel better doing it. And I just think as far as weightlifting itself, or even just being in the weight room, it's like you just have to show up and execute and refine and repeat. So it's again all very simple as far as the approach. I think there are other ways to get the same stimulus, but yeah, for me, Olympic lifting is definitely my default.
So, coaches, we're going to transition to talking about something that maybe you don't want to talk about: finances, and the fact that we have to pay bills. Like,
oh my gosh, yes,
you have to pay for your mortgage, your rent. Like, and maybe this will make you uncomfortable, and it's because somebody has somewhere told you that the root of money is the root of all evil. That is not in the Bible. The love of money and making money an idol and worshiping that is what was said. And so, like, if you have an apprehension to want to understand how to better take care of yourself, because within this duality of, oh, I don't want to talk about money, coaches also say, well, I should get paid more. And then they don't want to pay other coaches for education, which whole nother rabbit hole. Yeah. Access.
Yeah.
Talk about access for anybody that is not aware. Let's figure out the gap in the market that you're seeing, because I think this is something that is huge. I've already I talked about it with Dane Miller and Les Spellman before with kind of some things that they're doing. But educate everybody on access. Then we're going to dive into it.
Access. Access is my business. And so I recently started Access to help fill the void that I was seeing in collegiate athletics. And just to give a little bit of a background on this, my boyfriend is the head baseball coach at a D2 school out here in Virginia where we are. And he had one strength and conditioning coach at his university, and that person was responsible for 16 teams. So quite a tall measure. Yeah, I know, right? And, I think at that point, it's like your ability to burn out is just accelerated because you're just on the floor or you're just constantly in that, facility or whatever it may be. And so that individual decided that they were going to move on to some other things. And that came in the winter of 2024. And moving forward, they were going to have to find a strength and conditioning coach in the middle of the year. And basically, they didn't have anyone to fill the role. And so they had told the sport coaches, like, you guys are going to need to be the people in the weight room manning all of this and doing all of this. And, my boyfriend, as I mentioned, he's a baseball coach. So spring, they're in season. Baseball is a massive roster. They've got 60 plus guys. And so basically he was going to be tasked with, you're going to be the head sport coach for baseball. You got to win the games. You got to do all the sport coach responsibilities. Hey, but also, like, our weight room can't house 60 guys at once. So you're going to need to come in here 3 separate sessions for 3 times a week for you to man all of the weight room sessions as well. And that's just a massive load to put on a coach, a sport coach. And so I was starting to see that as an issue. And I started to do some research on smaller universities and the D2, the D3 setting. And a lot of them have this setup where you have 1 to maybe 2 coaches and you still have the same volume of athletes that you do at the Division I level. And the issue is they just don't have resources and the finances. And so what I decided to do was, that was actually right around the time that I was dismissed from Tennessee. And the timing of it was very odd. My boyfriend sent me a text and he's like, hey, our strength coach is leaving. Do you want to be the strength coach here? And I was like, no.
Jaded.
And then literally the next day they're like, hey, you don't have a job. So actually what I was able to do was, thankfully, the strength coach had programmed all the way out for the spring. And so what I did was I came in and I helped coach his baseball guys. And I didn't change the program really. I just helped with modifying the load. I introduced them to some readiness testing. And at the time, he's living in Virginia and I'm living in Tennessee. So we're a long distance. And so I'm not here every single session. But the athletes were still getting their work done, and I was still able to look at their readiness testing, and I was still able to modify things as needed. And I realized I don't have to be in the weight room every day for them to do their work and get better. And so it made me think about a remote kind of position. How would this work? It's something that I've always kind of searched for. And then I started to think, like, schools contract, athletic training, they contract dietitians, they contract mental health. And I was like, why doesn't anyone contract strength and conditioning coaches? And I started to see a lot of D1 coaches leaving the strength and conditioning setting. And I was like, why aren't you taking your college education and experience and applying it to college? Like, why are you building online platforms for individuals that aren't athletes? It just didn't make sense to me. And so it finally clicked that I could contract with universities and I could do all of the work remote and I could be on site every so often and I could still monitor things and they could actually just have a strength coach on site running the lifts if I just programmed everything.
Player Data is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for GPS technology, and it's simple. The price you cannot beat, and the validity and accuracy of their technology is second to none. The price is outstanding. Go ahead and reach out to them to learn more about the pricing specific to you and however many units you're going to get. And then the validity. Player Data has been tested and run through FIFA's validation process for FIFA to then be utilizing Player Data technology. FIFA, we all know that name. They would not be utilizing a product that cannot live up to the competition and cannot be able to provide real, live, and accurate data. Player Data is able to do this. Not only do they have great software and hardware, but I know that the customer service is fantastic because I have worked with these individuals before. Click the link down below to learn more about Player Data.
And so that became kind of the birth of Access. And so what it is it's a contracted strength and conditioning business that I can offer on-site, services, but I can handle all of the work behind the scenes. And so that sport or that strength coach that's there every single day, some of the workload is being taken off of them because all they have to worry about is coaching on the floor. and any, injury modifications, any readiness testing things, all of that, like I can handle without having to be there. And so it's a new concept as far as I know. I mean, I didn't even know that Les and Dane were kind of on the same thought process here. But I don't know anyone else that's in the market partnering specifically with universities to help those athletes and to help those coaches, because a lot of places are just really struggling with resources and finances. And this is a massive solution to all of that. So it's been great.
Yeah, it was in about 2022 that Les was doing stuff with Arizona football, helping them with speed work. Same thing, like, hey, like the strength coach for the football team, they're doing their stuff and they're reaching back out to Les, like, hey, we're doing this and these are the numbers, and working with them. And then Dane's way of it paired with what you're talking about makes the most sense to me, because it was a university that was like, wait a minute, we get our new head strength coach is a GA. And therefore, this GA position changes every 2 years, right? So now we want continuity. Like, sure, this GA wants to do well, but like we, the sport coach, we want to win more than this GA. And we want continuity in our strength program. If we're getting a new GA every 2 years, the program changes. Yep. Let's hire this guy to write the program. This guy can teach the GA how to run the lift and do these things and go about it. And I think it's beautiful for those sports that want to have tenure with a coach. They can teach a young coach to work on the floor what to do, because we both know on-the-job training is where 90% of your education really comes from, because 90% of the universities we're graduating from, you're not working with athletes in your master's or bachelor's degree. So you're graduating and you don't actually know how to do what you do. Right. Like, imagine being a plumber, then you graduate and you've never plumbed or worked on teeth as a dentist. Yet that's our current reality in strength and conditioning. It's not all the time. Like, yes, if you get a GA, that's the except. But I'm talking, if you are just a graduate student and you are going to a university to get your master's degree and you are not a GA, you are a master's enrolled level student, you are not routinely working with athletes or working with people. No. That's so backwards.
Yeah. And I didn't even realize that Dane was doing it that way, because it seems very similar to what, I'm trying to do. And the continuity piece is massive, because when you have, like you said, the one coach for 16 teams, burnout is a really real thing. And so they were seeing a lot of turnover within their department. And so I think that this solves a lot of issues. But again, to your point, you can teach from this model as well, and you can give people an experience without them actually handling the parts of the training that the athletes really need. And so you can have an expert level knowledge, base, write out everything, and as long as you have someone that's competent enough to execute on the floor, it actually works very, very well. And then you're educating that coach as well. So with in Dane's case, that being a GA, it's like their experience is going to be so minimal and their knowledge base is going to be, again, same thing. And so they're going to have massive benefit learning from him. And so I think it's been helpful here, at least from what I've seen, because, they hired a strength coach here that he's worked with athletes, but he hasn't worked with them at the college level. And so I've helped him navigate a lot of that. And he uses me as a resource for so many things. And so I think it's helped build a really great relationship for him and I, but also for the athletic department as a whole, because he's learning about training and programming a certain way. And I see the way that I am training and working with baseball and softball and volleyball, I see some of those remnants in now the teams that he's working with. And so I think it's made it better for the department as a whole.
Yeah, and that's where it can just help. I mean, there's a reason why for us at Towson, and I'm sure at a lot of other schools, the throws coach, if they have a CSCS, they train the throwers, because that's one less team that everybody doesn't have to worry about when you have a limited staff. And if you're able to get a highly competent coach that can help you do the thing, and you can kind of be the weight room supervisor and kind of catch your breath, like, it's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really, I don't know how this hasn't become more of a thing, to be honest, but I'm happy to be one of the first.
You think it could potentially go into the high school JUCO NAIA setting? I know you're going to hope so, right? Like, shoot.
I would definitely hope so. I don't know how long it will take to kind of make that leap, and I really don't know. I think you just find a lot of disparity on the high school level. Even places that have those individuals available to train athletes. I don't know many places that have strength and conditioning coaches, and maybe I'm just old school and I'm unaware. But, I've talked about this model to a handful of other people before I really kind of put it together. And they were like, do you think this could be like a tactical thing? Like, can you do this kind of branch and this kind of branch? And, a lot of people have ideas about it, but it's really the ability to execute and for also departments to be open to a very different concept than what's been the traditional model.
Before we even talked about this, I had to go through I had to caveat all of this because our profession they have just such an aversion to talking about finances, even though we all do have to pay our bills. Why do you think the profession struggles with this conversation?
Oh, because the profession is like built on suffering. I don't know. I think there's a lot of, there seems to be a lot of pride in, well, I work 12 hours a day and I didn't get to go to my cousin's wedding and I missed that vacation. And like, for some reason that seems to be like a badge of honor to people, even though like the pay can be so minimal, but yet your barrier of entry from an education standpoint is like the highest it can be probably in the coaching setting. So there's just a lot of this like martyrdom, I almost feel like. And talking about finances has become very taboo for people. And I think a lot of athletic departments benefit from our silence, because if we're not going to say anything, then there's no reason to make a change. And so what I would really like, and I know I'm, not in the setting traditionally still, but I still am part of it, is I just would really love to see more transparency around finances and salaries. And I'm just so tired of hopping on social media and being like, here's a $10,000 position and no benefits and 40-hour work weeks and like these low paying positions, and people are happy to take them. And as long as those roles continue to get filled, like there's going to be no value. So
I'm going to tease something real quick.
Yeah.
We are in the process. Strength Coach Network is working on one of these because there is a website called openthebooks.com.
Okay.
And so for anybody that works at a public university or public institution, like you can look up and see like my salary when I worked at Towson, because we're a public institution. You can go to openthebooks.com and you can see what my salary was. You can see what any strength coach's salary was. And the goal behind it is any of these salary surveys that get put out by any organization, there's no consequence for saying something that's not true. But there is a source that is saying what the salary is. So we're going to do this at different states, across different levels, high school and college, to be able to let coaches know, hey, if you're going to get into the field, this is kind of what you can expect for a salary.
Yeah, I think that having transparency and kind of opening the dialogue around finances and salary is super important, because people need to be aware. And the way that, I hate to be all like the economy, but the way that it's going, it's like things are just getting more and more expensive and the cost of living is very high, and people, the job demands so much of you. And your time, that it's like, it's not fair to have multiple jobs and suffer because we literally preach sleep and recovery and nutrition and all these things. And it's like, we are the most hangry, tired people out there. And so the irony is, it's not lost on me, and there needs to be more conversation around it. And I'm going to share a quick little story with you. I was asked a little bit ago by an organization, we'll leave it at that, to for them to print some of my work that I put together. They wanted to publish it. And I was like, great. I don't know, like, can you give me an example of like what you've done in the past, just so I can understand? And then I said, what's the compensation for publishing my material. And they were like, oh, well, there is no compensation. Like, you're doing it for the betterment of the field and to get, national recognition and, get your name out there and get your university out there. And I respectfully and professionally declined. And then I also said, it's my intellectual property. And if you want to move the field forward, you will pay me, because that is what we need. We don't need any more free work. So they had no response back to that. And that's okay with me. But I think it's important that we are valued for the things that we do and the intellect that we have and the work we put in. So this is an important conversation.
I agree. And shout out to Brett Bartholomew for moving. He was the first one that I heard talk about it, because as he said, he's like, nobody would say to you, Ryan, if you're a lawyer, well, Ryan, if you cared about this, you would try this case for free if you loved the field. Or Ryan, if you're a chef, you would allow the food that leaves your restaurant to go there for free. Or if you're a dentist, you would operate on people's teeth for free. Yet people will say, well, you're going to move the field forward. No. You're going to move the field forward, and you're going to financially benefit off of my stuff.
Correct. And I was not going to be put into that. So I stood my ground, and if they wanted to compensate me, I would have happily let them publish, but they didn't want to. And I was like, fine. So
you have your financial hat on, you're in an MBA program now. What business concepts have immediately changed the way you think about earning power, job security, long-term career strategy as a coach?
Yeah. Opportunity cost. Everything costs something. And I think that is a concept that I haven't really even realized or grasped until recently. And so you have to decide if whatever it is, whether it's your time, your money, your sanity, anything, everything comes at a cost. And so you have to decide, is it worth it for whatever you're deciding to trade? And so I think that's super important. Big one for me, because again, it's come up, is just diversifying your income, especially as a strength and conditioning coach, I think is massively important. So relying on one income from one employer that now doesn't seem to have any type of security, I think is very, very risky moving forward. And I wish if I was younger, I would have grasped this concept sooner. I think it's important. My MBA it's been difficult to navigate, and there's been a lot of tough classes and tough times, but it hasn't taken away from me as a coach. I think it's only made me understand like leverage and the role that business plays in athletics that much more. I feel like it just has given me quite an edge to understanding the business side that the universities work within that no one speaks of.
Well, that's, one of the even sick parts that you just had to caveat, like, oh, I am going to get my MBA, I'm bettering myself, but don't worry, I'm still coaching. It's like, wait a minute, why are if athletes are going to school and doing their sport and doing everything they else are, like, why can't a coach better themselves and do two things without it being like, do you have enough time to be coaching and programming? It's like, yeah, maybe instead of going out drinking and partying or whatever, I've decided to spend my time to better myself.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Again, I think the field is built on continuing education, being on the cutting edge, like all these, buzzwords. But it's like when I'm actually looking to put money into a legitimate, not a weekend certification or a webinar or whatever, it's like, well, why are you doing that? The amount of strength coaches that have asked me, they're like, why are you doing that? I'm like, do you not understand the field that we work in? It's all a business. It's all a business at the end of the day. And you know what? I think it helps diversify me as far as my knowledge base and me as a person, and also just provides a lot of potential opportunity down the line.
Last two questions to respect your time. Coaches listen to the show because they want to build a sustainable long-term career. You've lived this full spectrum of the profession. What is one message or one resounding thought that you hope coaches take away from your journey?
Yeah. You can love this field, and I hope people understand that I love this field. I'm not here to trash talk it, but you can love the field and be all in without losing yourself as a person in it. And you can be ambitious, competitive, driven, but you don't have to sacrifice your health and your relationships and your identity. You can work toward something that's going to help sustain you instead of kind of steal bits of you. And I think that that's a piece that gets missed a lot, but is super important, especially for a young coach.
Final question. What is the one thing people don't know about you that you wish everybody would know about you?
Okay, so I struggled on this one. Do you want like a lot of random like facts, or do you want like a story that someone has no clue?
Whatever you want. This is about you.
Oh man. Well, yeah, this is where I was struggling a little bit if I should share. Okay, so I'll tell you a story that kind of goes into all of this because I don't think a lot of people know. I struggled a lot very, very early on as a young coach, and I hope that young coaches listening, if they're struggling, this is relatable. But there was a point in time where I was on academic probation in my grad program, and you have one semester to turn it around. So if you don't, you're kicked out of school. So
Whoa.
I almost lost my grad assistant role because my grades were not great. And I struggled a lot as a GA. And there was a point in time I was in my car and I called my mom crying to her. And I said, can I quit? Can I just come home and quit? Like, I can't do this anymore. And my mom, she's no sucker. She's got a backbone. She's tough. She goes, no, you said you want to do this. Go finish it. And like, that was her response. And if I would have been allowed to quit, this career never would have happened and blossomed. And a lot of the things that I've been able to do and say and platforms I can speak on and where I am now, I don't think would have happened. And I struggled a lot very early on. And so if there's any young coaches struggling, just know that you're not alone. It doesn't happen to only you, but also it doesn't mean that you can't be successful at the end of the day. So if this is something you really want, you will find a way. I did pull my grades up. I did not get kicked out. I did graduate, and turns out I want to go back for more school. So here we are, MBA. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows, and that's my own personal story of struggle, and it's not a highlight that I talk about a lot, but it's part of the story.
That's awesome. And I think I talk about with people, winners do quit. They just don't quit things that are hard and good for them. They quit things that are bad. Like winners quit drinking, smoking, partying, bad habits, right? Like they quit those things, but they don't quit something that's difficult that they know is good for them, right? Like it was hard, but you drew on the well of people in your family. Like that's fantastic. That's awesome. Shout out to you for that.
Yeah. It was, like I said, a lot of a struggle. There were many days where I woke up and I was like, I'm not going in. I'm like, they can fire me today. I don't care. And then, my logical brain started to take over, and I was like, wait, I have athletes that are counting on me, and like I wanted to do this. And so I would get up every day even though I didn't want to.
You know what? I had that when I went back to college for my PhD. I remember day one. I hadn't gone back. I graduated in December of 2011, and then now it's August of 2016, and I'm trying to go to online school, and it's like, here's all this stuff and Blackboard login. And I was like, day one, I was like, Megan, I'm quitting. Like, I can't, like this. I have no idea what I'm doing. She's like, shut up, take it one bite at a time. And I was like, all right. But like, same thing. I was like, nope, can't do this. Like overwhelmed. And yeah. So I appreciate that insight.
Yeah. We've all been there.
Ryan, I appreciate your time. It has been a journey to our coaches out there that have stuck with us this long. I appreciate it. Is there anywhere, any socials, anywhere exactly for them to follow you, follow Access? Where do you want people to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like on Instagram basically only. So, but I'm there as coach_Metz. That's METZ. And then Access, if you are looking for the business side of stuff, that is AXIS and then _SC. So
appreciate it, Ryan. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.